And good day, everyone. Richard Cowperthwait for Northwest Access TV. Thanks for joining us as we get ever closer to the very important November 6th midterm elections in Vermont and everywhere else in the country. Happy to have three of the candidates running for the legislature from the Franklin 4 district, two-member district covering Swanton and Sheldon. And with us on the set, Representative Brian Savage, a Swanton Republican, Mariana Gamache, a Swanton Republican, and the Democratic candidate, Nick Brassow. Thanks for making the time. Good to see you, folks.
Yeah.
So, Brian, seeking a fifth term, kind of getting used to this. Anything different about your run for a fifth term than other elections? And I'm actually probably getting ahead of myself. Feel free to give us a little background.
Okay, well,
Start with that, probably.
I first was elected in the elections of 2008, and have since 2011, midterm in 2011, have served as the Assistant Minority Leader, or also known as the Whip, of the Republican Caucus, lifelong resident of Swanton. I've been involved in civic affairs in Swanton for, I think, from the time I was probably 19 years old at various capacities. And so I'm seeking the fifth term. There's really not much different. I do enjoy the work. I enjoy representing the people and being their voice in Montpelier.
And you're still the Whip.
I am until it's up to the caucus to decide what we're going to do.
But for this last term,
I'm still the Whip, and but I am not, as Representative Turner, who is the Minority Leader, will be stepping down as Minority Leader because he's not seeking re-election.
Someone you're working for in his Lieutenant Governor campaign.
That's right, and but I am not going to seek the position of the leader. And it's up to the caucus whether they want me as one of the assistants or not. So.
Did you give that some thought? Was that you might have told me that during the legislature. You weren't really interested?
No, not really. Part of the deal, and I'll be the first to admit this, I'm a horrible fundraiser.
You told me that before.
And I just wouldn't be comfortable because that position does have to go out and raise some funds, and I'm just not that comfortable.
So that was a good reason for you not to give it serious.
That's right. Yeah. So we'll see what happens, and what is up to the caucus as to ultimately who will be the two, because we have two assistant minority leaders, and so it'll be up to them. And I don't mind staying.
You'd be open to still being a Whip?
Well, I would be from the standpoint that if I'm not the Whip, and so the leader, all of them would be brand new in their leadership position, and they need sometimes experience there. Although I wouldn't be too far away, but that's up to the caucus, and then they have their first caucus.
Mariana, seeking your third term in the Vermont House, and again, give us a little background on yourself.
Well, I first ran in 2014 successfully, and then I ran again in 2016 and was fortunate enough to be reelected by the constituents in the district. And I'm back for another run. And hopefully the people of Swanton and Sheldon have been approving of what I have been doing. And I would like to go back again.
Very good. Well, looked like for a while you folks were going to have a free ride, and then a funny thing happened, or a good thing happened to the Democrats, I guess. So, Nick, you got enough write-in votes during the August 14th primary to get one of the two Democratic nominations. I guess I should note, Brian, you got the other Democratic nomination, so you got a DNR by you for the
an R&D,
R&D,
officially RD.
Gotcha, R&D. So again, had you given this thought beforehand? Or did that come up kind of at the 11th hour?
It came up at kind of the 11th hour. I was trying to, I'm the Democratic town chair in Swanton, so I was trying hard to find a candidate to run. And it just didn't seem like it was going to happen. So I figured there was a need for someone to step in. I made a lot of phone calls. I know some Democrats around the town. And I was able to secure enough write-in votes to get on the ballot.
Very good.
Now these two folks have some competition.
Good for you. And your first run for political office?
I ran for Justice of the Peace, I guess. My name was on the ballot 2 years ago. But,
oh, really?
that was about it.
And unsuccessfully, you
Yeah,
won?
nothing. I wasn't doing anything serious with that.
And how, so again, these are a couple veteran lawmakers here. How have you found your first bid for office? Have you been active? Has it been an active campaign?
I've been trying to make it active. I've been making a lot of phone calls. I've been knocking on some doors.
Yeah.
Just recently went to Sheldon, was in Swanton yesterday. Just been knocking on doors and calling people.
Yeah.
And just
Question
seeing-
I'll ask about how much money do you plan to spend on your campaign?
Oh, not too much. I don't.
Not in the thousands, more like hundreds, if
more
that?
like
or-
hundreds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mariana, what about yourself? Roughly how much money do you think you're going to end up spending on this campaign?
Oh, it's hard to say right now.
Yeah. In the thousands
really
as
is.
opposed to the hundreds?
I would say probably in the thousands as opposed to the
Yeah.
hundreds.
And
Yeah.
Brian, what about yourself?
Well, running first time out is always most expensive because
Yeah.
you got to order the lawn signs and all that.
Yeah.
But I would say in the low thousands. I probably this year will probably do it for between 2,500, 3,000 at the most.
Yeah.
More if I can. I'm the conservative banker, remember, so I don't like to spend money. So, but certainly not into. 5, 6, 8,000.
Yeah.
Any of that? No.
Yeah. Nick, I suspect you'd probably acknowledge you're probably the underdog in this race. Would that be a fair statement?
For sure, for sure. I just felt there was a need for competition. I don't seriously expect to win. I'm just interested in getting more involved in politics and learning more about the community. And at least I'm trying to provide a more progressive platform than these two folks might be offering.
Yeah. Well, good for you to jump in. In fact, no, as you folks well know, nobody in Franklin County know, of course, we're losing a good hunk of the delegation through retirement.
Retirement,
Nobody
yeah.
has a free ride. Everybody's got competition. So.
There is. But I will say,
Yeah.
I'm the county Republican chair.
Oh, is that right? Oh,
Yeah,
so
yes.
have you had that position for a while?
About a year.
No, really? Okay.
And it was extremely difficult to recruit candidates. I mean,
Boy, I bet.
that's kind of a statewide
Yeah.
issue. Very difficult to recruit candidates.
Yeah.
So
Why is it getting more difficult? Why do you think that's the case, Brian?
well, I think they see people see the amount of time that we put in, and they saw how lengthy the legislative session went, and then the
Long
special
session,
session, and they just feel they don't have the time or the financial commitment.
Yeah.
And it is a financial commitment. I mean, especially if you're employed
Yeah.
with an employer, you're going to take a hit on your salary for a number of months.
Yeah. I don't think I'm going to get into the Washington situation, which I find pretty painful these days on a number of fronts. But do you think that's affecting? Think it's harder to find candidates to run locally, just given the apparent dysfunction in Washington so much? Does that filter down a little, or do you think that's not much of a factor?
That may be some of the factor. I don't think it's
Yeah.
the major.
Yeah.
I think if somebody should mention that to me in the process of recruiting, I'll say, well, it's that's the big players in Washington,
Yeah.
and things don't go sometimes too smooth in Vermont, but they haven't certainly gone to the level that they're doing in Washington.
But of course, statewide, you have a Republican governor, Phil
Right.
Scott, certainly most consider the favorite to win re-election.
Mm-hmm.
You're working for Don Turner, certainly running an active campaign against Democratic Progressive Lieutenant Governor David Zuckerman. But the other four constitutional offices, I know maybe there's a Republican. I guess there's a Republican opponent in all the other
There
races,
are,
but
yeah.
but boy, it certainly doesn't seem like there's any significant race. You might disagree, but it sure doesn't seem like the other four incumbents. Beth Pierce, the treasurer, T.J. Donovan, the attorney general, Jim Kondo, secretary of state, Doug Hoffer, auditor. Seems like none of those folks have much to worry about in November. Or would you disagree with that?
Well, politics being the funny thing, I think certainly they got the incumbent advantage. and our candidates got into the race very late. Our candidate for Attorney General, I know pretty well. He was one of my roommates for the last
Really?
2 years.
And that is?
Jansen Wilhoit from St. Johnsbury.
Oh, really?
He was a representative, or is a representative,
Oh, yeah.
and decided not to seek re-election, and he decided to run for Attorney General. He is an attorney, obviously. He works over in the St. Johnsbury area, and so that was kind of a surprise. But he, and he's out doing his
Certainly
thing.
sounds like, a legit candidate.
Yeah, I think so. The other people who are running for the variety of office, I really don't know.
There was a case
Brooke
where
Page.
H. Brooke Page won a bunch of nominations and
Yeah.
then was able to,
Yeah.
whatever, some other Republican surface at the 11th
Don't
hour.
necessarily agree with filing for more than one office, but
Anyway, Nick, in your campaigning, what's jumping out as a big issue or biggest issue or big issues? What do you mostly hear about from your would-be constituents?
But would be I'm mostly from the elderly, especially the tax rate
Yeah.
is a little too high for especially if you're on a fixed income.
Yeah.
I would, for example, they just can't afford with the property tax rates. And I got solutions for that. I would think we probably need to start paying for education, moving to an income tax. And what else have I been hearing about? Act 46, a bit.
The school consolidation.
Consolidation, some opposition to that.
Yeah.
And I think we should be making that law more voluntary.
Mariana, what are you hearing? Any particular issues jumping out when you're campaigning?
Not really, just in general, taxes in general on every level.
Yeah.
Certainly with retired people. And Act 46 is a big issue.
Yeah.
I think it's going to remain a big issue for a foreseeable future. But there is a court case now pending that Brooke Page actually was
The aforementioned Brooke Page.
the aforementioned. And he got it so as far as the state Supreme Court. And I know it was supposed to be on the docket the beginning part of October, but I haven't followed up on it to see exactly where it is at this time, because I didn't know the date it was going to be on the docket. So, but it's around now.
Right.
So
How did you vote on Act 46?
I voted against
You
it.
voted against it, Brian?
Okay, I voted against it for one very good reason. First of all, I'm not necessarily opposed to mergers, but certainly it has to be with voter approval. But in the case of Act 46, we have a unique situation involving the town of Sheldon, the Sheldon School District. Sheldon, Swanton, Highgate, and Franklin are all members of the Franklin Northwest Supervisory Union. Swanton, Highgate, and Franklin are the sending towns and member towns of Missisquoi Valley Union High School, and run pre-K through 6 elementary schools. Sheldon runs a pre-K through 8 elementary school and have school choice for high school.
And that school choice, for the record, anywhere in the state, Franklin County. I mean, school choice.
As far as I know, they can go to
anywhere in the state.
right.
Typically, it's going to be Franklin County.
So so that kind of left them, And I asked 3 different people, all in the know in Montpelier, how will this affect a town like Sheldon? And I got 3 different answers. So I couldn't risk. The integrity of the Sheldon school, of the Sheldon student, so I voted no. And of course, now we know what has transpired. I'm glad of my no vote. Sheldon, of course, is going to be paired up with 2 other towns, I believe Berkshire and Bakersfield. And that's causing them certainly some very much concern. And Franklin has got concerns.
Montgomery certainly huge
Montgomery
concerns.
has big concerns. So, I mean, this is just a real a boondoggle in the making. And the State Board of Education is sitting there just saying, well, you're going to do it because we said so, and we don't care what you say. The one thing that this did bring out is the fact that for years we thought everybody's told Vermont's got local control. We never had local control. And this is very evident. So,
You mentioned the court case. Would you like, aside from the court case, is there any movement, do you think, or would there be in the legislature to make changes in Act 46, Mariana, or is it a done deal and that's the way it is? Or?
Well, I guess when we go back, we'll see what exactly it is. I guess what I don't like about, one of the things that I don't like about Act 46 is I don't like forced mergers. I think if districts or schools want to consolidate because it's good for their community and it's good for their students, they should be able to do that. But I certainly don't think that it is the role, I really don't think it's the role of the state to come in and just arbitrarily say, well, you're going to do it, you figure it out, work it out the best way you can, and you're going to merge. So I just think it's just not within. I don't believe it's that the state should be doing that.
Nick, I realize you weren't there then, but any Act 46 certainly, especially in Franklin County, again Sheldon, Franklin, and Montgomery especially, it's a huge issue.
Yeah.
I think does this, as you look at it from the outside, was this not a good law? How do you see it?
I'm not against Act 46 in principle. I think the schools should be encouraged to consolidate. I think there's benefits to it in terms of with some districts getting more school choice, and some districts there's cost savings to be had in the future. I don't think forced mergers are the way to go though, because I think that you're going to spend a lot of money on lawsuits and whatnot to force these people to do something that might have a pretty solid district already and can beat the standards of the law. So I don't really see the benefit of forcing schools to consolidate.
Yeah. Certainly the last legislative session, tell you folks about a long session, I think, Brian, which you mentioned, and certainly gun control measures became a very big issue, with Governor Scott kind of changing his mind there with the threat at Fairhaven. Again, big question, we don't have a ton of time to deal with it, but do you feel the governor went too far on gun control measures?
Yeah, I do.
And as you so voted, I guess.
I voted against S55. There were parts of S55 that I could have supported. However, when it came down to magazine size and everything else involving actually the guns, I was opposed to. I'm a big supporter of the Second Amendment in Article 16 of the Vermont State Constitution. I know from people on as far as the magazine size, that was just the number they pulled out of their hat in the Judiciary Committee. You can change a magazine in less than a second. So I don't really see what that accomplishes. Anyways, that's there were. As I said, there were some aspects in some of the other bills certainly, I supported, but the actual gun control, I definitely had some problems with.
Yeah. Mariana, the same. Again, you voted against this too.
Yes, I did.
Were there some? did you just think this was just a bad idea altogether? Were there some parts of it that you were more sympathetic to, or not really?
No, I just didn't like the whole idea. The governor had said initially that the only kind of legislation he thought that would be doable, as far as he was concerned, would be addressing the issue of school safety. And within that context, depending upon what exactly the legislation said, that would not be, we do need to do something. But the law as passed has absolutely no bearing on anything in terms of school safety. I'm a very strong Second Amendment advocate, and I see a lot of laws that have, constitutional laws that have been kind of nibbled around the outsides, and it makes me rather skittish when it comes to any kind of legislation that can oftentimes be the nose under the tent, and I'm not willing to do that.
Nick, again, a question for you. Did the governor go too far with gun control measures or not far enough?
I don't think so at all. I would have supported the legislation. I feel like the banning bump stocks would make the state safer. I feel that reducing the magazine signs, magazine in a gun, the limit, that's the one chance you can tackle someone is that 1 second if there's a mass shooting happened. I think these laws will make Vermont safer, and if I was in the legislature, I would have voted for them.
Brian, again, as minority whip in the House, Governor Stern, of course, he had opposition in the primary. Keith Stern picked up, I think, about a third of the vote. Has that issue hurt do you think it's hurting him significantly in the general election among Republicans and more conservatives or whatever? Or I guess as I look at it, I'm not sure a lot of those folks are going to be voting for the Democratic candidate Christine Hallquist, but is there a concern that they may sit it out? Are they that upset with the governor, or has that faded some?
There is a concern. I think it has faded some. Yeah. However, it's still a concern that people will stay home and not vote. And of course, we discourage that because they have to think of the down ticket as well as the top of the ticket. We have to also look at the governor's record as far as the economy and the state budget. He's done very well with that. So, but I know he's lost probably some of his base, and they recognize that. So
you're backing the governor's reelection bid, I assume.
Yes, definitely.
Are you as enthusiastic about that as you were? Did that hurt you personally when he voted for the measures he did?
Well, I was very disappointed, and upset. But he had his reasons, and he has to live with his decisions, just like we have to live with the decisions. But I still back him for re-election, and I plan on voting for him certainly. Yeah.
Mariana, what about yourself? Are you backing the governor's re-election bid?
Yeah. There has been legislation passed that he has chosen not to veto, which I have not been happy with. But I also recognize that the composition of this entire state is, when I look at my constituents, I have to take into account the fact that people come from different political stripes, and you have to kind of adjust that and make sure that what you're doing, what you're passing or voting on is going to be acceptable to the majority of those people. The governor has the entire state are his constituents, and there are people come from extreme views and extreme positions. And so I believe that even though I don't agree with some of the positions that he has taken, I understand in some cases why he has taken those positions. And I have to say that it's not because of conversations I've had with him about the reasons behind whatever the reasons are that he's doing. I just look at it through the prism of the fact that everybody in the state thinks differently about, and you have to look at those people as well to see the things that they are expecting from their governor. Yeah. So, we have different views on things. But I think, especially in terms of the economy, I think the governor has done a phenomenal job. He let the legislature know from the get-go that he was going to be very strict on what he was going to approve and not approve. And basically said, don't send me any bills that have money in them, because I'm not going to vote for them. I'm not going to pass them. So, and that was very evident this year, especially with the budget fiasco that we had, and that turned out to be, in my opinion, purely political. And there was really no reason why we had to go in special session the way we did. The governor was forced into that position of calling special session. And that was very unfortunate. because I don't really think it accomplished anything in terms of being a good for the citizens of Vermont.
Yeah.
We had an enormous surplus unexpected revenue this year, and the governor's position, which he maintained, was that he didn't see the justification for raising any taxes, property taxes, be it homesteaded or non-homesteaded property. And he was right in that. And so the first two budgets that were sent to him, they were passed by the legislature, but he vetoed them.
Nick, do you think the governor took too hard a line on that, or how do you see that issue? Obviously got a ton of attention, special session.
Oh, I think he did. I think he ended up pretty much signing most of what the legislature wanted. So I think he took a stand for really. I think it just went for really no reason, and I generally think that we need to move in a different direction. I'm of course a Democrat.
You're supporting
Christine Hallquist.
Christine Hallquist.
Yeah, if we need to move in a different direction when it comes to things like paid family leave and a $15 minimum wage.
In fact, that was on my agenda. You would support both initiatives.
I would support both initiatives, and we need a government that will work towards progress instead of trying to stimmy it.
On the $15 minimum wage and paid family leave, Mariano?
So, people forget about the history of minimum wage going way back to when it was first instituted by the government. And that basically was to guarantee, minimum wage was meant for people who were first coming into the workforce that didn't have any business skills yet, in addition to, they may have had all of the training that they needed, but they weren't coming into the workforce with developed skills or knowledge. Now it has turned into become synonymous with a living wage, which is completely different from what the intent was.
So again, you oppose it then? You oppose $15?
So not every business that is in business can afford a $15 an hour minimum wage, especially the smaller the business, typically the smaller the business, the less it can afford that way. I'm thinking of the mom and pop kind of businesses where there are less than 10 employees, where it's really difficult because in addition, it's not only the wage that increases, but it's all of the other taxes that go along with it, in addition to the fact that the employees who may now be getting that $15 minimum wage or $15 an hour wage, if you go to 15 as a minimum, then the people that are making 15 are going to expect, and rightfully so, to have an increase in their salaries. And I don't know how affordable, and I really don't think I think it's up to businesses to know what they can afford. It's just like we all have a budget, and a family budget, and we know what we can afford and what we can't afford. And it's the same with businesses. Now, we're not talking about major corporations, and even they have limitations to what they can do. So I don't think it's in the interest of the citizens for the government to be dictating how much money people should be making. And even when it comes to paid leave is great if a business can afford it. I understand, I was a single parent for a number of years, so I totally understand what that is like in terms of not being able to be paid if you have to take time off for various things. But again, if a business can't afford it and the government says you must, what is going to happen then is that if the business stays in business, it's going to find other ways of not hiring as many people, becoming more automated, or just moving, just picking up and going. And we've had too many businesses that have left the state. We have businesses that are not expanding. It's it can be negative. We're a small state, and people can't really afford a whole lot of things that the state would like people and businesses to do.
Brian, you see, again, is the state just trying to do too much in your view on,
Yeah,
on issues like that?
I think so. The minimum wage, and a lot of what Mariana says is certainly correct. There is the compression factor, which is when somebody's already at $15, and that's just going to create some problems. And businesses will automate. There will be actually a loss of positions in the state. Family leave, paid family leave. One of the biggest problems I had with the bill as it was presented, the state never had an actuary do the numbers. They just depended on the Joint Fiscal Office, who are very good people, but they are not actuaries. So I would favor a situation where the state may put out an RFP to insurance companies to offer a loss of income insurance group policy that the employers would pay into if they so choose. It would be voluntary. And I wouldn't have a problem necessarily with that, and let the actuaries, many of us, myself included, thought that they had forecast $7 million of expense. And without an actuary, we thought, well, what happens when that runs out of money? So that's it needed more homework.
Nick, you seem more comfortable with a more active government, or how do you see it?
Yes, I am. I believe I feel like if you want to go back historically, if you want to talk about like the early 1900s, they would have been arguing for very similar arguments against like a 99-cent minimum wage, saying small businesses and businesses can't afford it. People need to work up the ladder. I believe that the wage needs to. I don't believe that argument's valid. I believe that if people are paid more, that's more money getting pumped into the local economy. People can afford to buy more items and needs, and like childcare. When it comes to unpaid family leave, the U.S. is the only industrial country in the world that does not offer paid family leave. I think it's really denying a benefit that should have existed years and years ago. And I believe that having a mild payroll deduction to pay for that program wouldn't be the end of the world to most employees.
A big issue, lake water quality. And of course, you folks obviously representing Swanton and Sheldon. Swanton, you've got part of Missisquoi Bay, which for recent years, I think Lake Carmine might have supplanted it, but certainly Missisquoi Bay seemed to be kind of the poster child for lake water quality problems. Nick, there's been some criticism of the legislature for not dedicating a fund to just financially try to deal with water quality issues, kind of kicking the can down the road. Would you like to see some clear funding source for that, or how do you see that issue?
They have been kicking the can down the road, and I hope it doesn't continue to keep on happening.
Any thoughts on where you could get a bunch of money?
Sure, I think some of the local companies could pay a little bit more that lease and that pollute could pay a little bit more in terms of cleaning up the lake, and that would be one of the funding sources. I don't know if there'd be more money from the federal government's offering. That could be a possible possible source for cash. I'm sure I believe there's a study committee in the legislature trying to study the issue, and I'm sure they will we'll find more ways to possibly fund lake cleanup. But those would be two ideas about how we could possibly get that money.
Mariana, do you see that as fair criticism of the legislature hasn't nailed down a kind of a permanent funding source, or not? Is that a concern to you? Seems like we just go year to year on this issue.
It's a concern, but I live on the lake, so I'm certainly familiar with some of the issues. But we do need a funding stream. It's just that it's been difficult so far to come up with one that would be impacting in a good way in terms of actually being able to tackle the issue and really do some good. But to increase, we keep coming back to increasing or adding another tax. And people are pretty well taxed out. So I don't know where the funding stream is going to come from.
Right.
And there are a lot of studies that are being done about this. So hopefully there will be a mechanism, for this. But
Brian, your thoughts again? You do hear a lot about people being taxed out, but as a lake, is that just kind of tough luck for the lake?
No. It is a serious issue, and whatever we do, and when we identify the funding source, and unfortunately we don't have magic pots of money in state government, we have to be certain that we're not putting money in a black hole. I've always been a believer. I'm certainly not, whatever route that we go to fund, that there has to be a report back to the legislature every 5 or 7 years to see what progress is being made. And if there's no progress being made, or if the situation gets worse, pull the plug on the funding and go back to the drawing board and figure out what's going on. And it's ultimately, and I know they're addressing this, but we can do all we want. But when certain cities in the southern part of Lake Champlain have antiquated sewer systems that dump after every hard rain millions of gallons of sewage into the lake, and we know that the lake flows north, and guess where the lowest spots are? St. Albans Bay and Missisquoi Bay. We are no better off. So,
of course, Swanton comes to mind, talking to Swanton village officials, which I do from time to time. Swanton's being pressed, I guess all municipalities with wastewater facilities being pressed to reduce the amount of phosphorus. And it sounds like Swanton Village has I'm being told that they can't do what the state wants them to do. Is the state, and of course, wastewater facilities, I believe, are a pretty small part of the phosphorus problem in the lake. But any sympathetic to Swanton Village, or is the state pressing folks like the village too much?
I wasn't aware that they were getting pressed by the state. I know when I was on the village board, we were, and we took corrective measures. And we we separated the sewer system. At that time, and probably is still this way, the federal government rules where you did not have to treat your stormwater if you had a population of less than 100,000. So there's no city in Vermont that's got a population of 100,000, so none of them have to, by federal definition, have to treat their sewage. So I'm not aware. I know they weren't in the TMDL. I mean, and St. Albans City and St. Albans Town were. And I don't know how Swanton escaped that, but now I do know that if the process is that we have to treat the stormwater, it was designed, or so we were told at the time, that the stormwater system was designed. So I believe there's 4 outflows, if memory serves me correctly, that go into the river, that they can be easily all interconnected and go through a treatment facility. But I don't know. I'd have to talk to the village about that. I wasn't aware of it, Peter.
I think again, I'm hardly anything but an expert, but I think it's just a general. I mean, the state's just looking for all municipalities to reduce the amount of phosphorus, and I believe in the case of Swanton Village, I'm being told that they're not at all sure they can do what the state says they're supposed to do.
Okay.
We've talked taxes. We've talked quite a bit about taxes. Everybody says, hey, we're taxed out, lower taxes. Nick, is that realistic? Is it realistic to think taxes could be lowered, or is kind of the best case scenario to just reduce the increase in taxes, or how do you see that big issue?
I think we need to change who we tax.
And again, you mentioned income. You'd like to see more emphasis on income tax?
Yes, I would. I think
less on property tax?
And less on property tax. I think that's be the best way to deal with the high taxes when it comes to people with lower incomes in the state. I believe that what they're paying through property tax is mostly education. So it really needs to be. I think that really needs to be looked at.
Mariana, would you like any support for putting more emphasis on the income tax and less on property tax, or?
I would like more emphasis to be put on the education tax to try to get to resolving some of the issues that make up the greatest components in that. Governor Scott 2 years ago put forth a health care plan for the education community, and it almost passed. In the final analysis, it was 74-73 was the vote, I believe, and it turned into a political football.
This is for what, the statewide teachers would be under
Statewide,
a
Yes.
statewide health
Right,
care
healthcare
exactly,
contract,
exactly, which was the most ideal because all of those contracts were expiring at the same time.
Haven't the
And
teachers union, haven't they softened on that, or
They have.
They have. So that actually might, you might make some progress on that, or the legislature might next session possibly.
I don't know. In full disclosure,
Yeah.
I participate in that health plan because my wife is employed by Missisquoi High
Fair
School.
enough. Yeah.
And I know that, and not to cut Mariana off, but
No,
I
that's-
do know that 2 years ago when they had to redo their health plan, and I went to the informational meetings that they had, all the staff was invited, the plan that they were being offered was not that good, and I said to my wife, if they went with the governor's plan, it would be a better plan, and they would have been made whole. And I think that came back to roost. I think they realized that as they got into it, because nobody was happy with the plan. So, so I will have to see how that works out.
It's so unfortunate because had that plan been adopted, it would have put the brakes on the way in which taxes were increasing. Taxpayers would have gotten a rebate on a portion of the taxes, the way in which it was operating. Everybody would have been held harmless. There would have been increases, but in a very manageable way, so that nobody would suddenly go from having one kind of contract to another. And it really would have done a whole lot in terms of the quality of health care and the taxpayers. And it's very unfortunate that it didn't happen, because we're all sitting here now still discussing how we're going to put the brakes on the education portion of the taxes. And as you know, we can't tax anymore. What we need to do is reprioritize in this state. We have all sorts of programs, and the state really needs to make some just basic decisions about where the dollars are to go. And until that's really looked at, it's problematic.
Just down to a couple more minutes. So while we're on that subject, statewide teachers contract, that gets mentioned once in a while, Nick. Does that sound like a good way to go?
I would not change how we're the way we are, the collective bargaining with teachers.
Okay.
I'm a strong supporter of it.
Just quickly on that, yes or no? Do you statewide teachers
Yes,
contract? Mary Ann?
absolutely,
You'd like to see
absolutely.
that?
And the reason is because we put an enormous burden on our local school boards, who are volunteering to do service to their education community. It takes an enormous amount of time. It's a very complicated issue. And they are faced with negotiating with paid professional negotiators, and it's unfair to them. It's just all the way around, it's terribly unfair.
Okay. Brian, quickly on the
Yeah,
statewide teachers contract?
I agree with the statewide contract
say it.
for, it would be more efficient, and I believe more fair in the end.
Down to just a couple minutes. Let me just give you kind of a closing statement here. But Nick, take a minute or so, make your case. Why would
Sure.
you be a good choice for the good folks in Swanton and Sheldon to send you to Montpelier in January?
I think it would be a good choice because I'd be a new young voice for the legislator. I would work for progressive change in the legislature. I would make sure that we have, once we get Christine Hallquist elected governor, we have someone that in Swanton that will back her up on her different policy issues like $15 minimum wage, paid family leave, universal primary care, a whole host of issues that I think will make our community a better place in Swanton.
Mariana, quickly, why should folks send you back for a third term?
Well, because I want to go back in order to follow through on initiatives that have been taken. I believe I have served my community well. I have, when I first ran, of course, I didn't have a voting record, but I did make my views known. And I think that the feedback I get from people is that they're pleased with what I have been doing. And I encourage everyone to look at my voting record.
Very good. Brian, why should folks send you back for a 5th term to Montpelier?
Well, first of all, I've got experience, and I know how the system works, and whether we agree or disagree with it, but you have to know how to move around that system. I just enjoy what I'm doing, and I feel that I'm a good representative to the people of the district.
Very good. I think that's going to be a wrap. And thanks very much to Brian Savage, State Rep from Swanton, Mariana Gamache, State Rep from Swanton, Republican, and Brian running with the Democratic nomination as well, and Nick Brasso, the Democratic candidate from Swanton running for the legislature. Thanks for the time. Appreciate you all coming on board here. And again, we're taping this show in case there's a huge issue that comes up after we tape. We're taping this show on October 10th. But of course, the election, November 6th, not far away, and early voting's been going on for some time. So if November 6th is not a convenient time for folks to vote, get out there and vote anytime between now and then. Anyway, thanks a lot.
Okay.
Thanks
you,
for
Richard.
watching
Thank
us
you.
here on
Thank you.
Northwest Access
Thank
TV. I'm Richard Cowperthwait, and many thanks to my man Zach for doing all the hard work. See ya. Vote.